Well, grand rising, everyone. My name is Reverend Dr. Alice Reid, and I'm the spiritual director here, and I'm so happy to join you on this beautiful fall day. Definitely reminds me a little more of the East Coast than most of our fall days here in Southern California. But it is a little bit chilly. It's supposed to be 80 degrees later. Like, the weather here is lovely, and one of the reasons I just love being here in Southern California with you. And of course, you are another reason I love being here in this part of the world. So thank you for joining us this morning. This month we are exploring this topic of loving no matter what. Loving no matter what. We're looking at leaning into those places where we might find discomfort, where things may not feel like they're landing. Maybe there's a challenge of some sort that we're having. But what we teach in this philosophy is that it's all God, that everything we experience is spirit manifesting through the body of God, which is you, which is the earth, which is the environment, which is everything that we experience. And today we're talking about the ground of being, and we're going to go a little deeper, literally, because I want to talk about dirt. Anybody want to talk about dirt? The sacred soil of life itself. I love the metaphor of gardening when we look at our teaching and our philosophy, and I think it lands really well with folks when we begin to think about how life recreates itself over and over again. There is this thing that is happening below our feet that is full of endings and beginnings, and it is full of the holy mystery. When I think about fall, I think about the leaves that fall into the ground and decompose and go down into the soil, and it becomes food for insects and worms and creepy, crawly, dark, wet, moist things, right? And for some of you might be like, ew. But that is really part of the decomposition of life, is part of the creation of new life. And yet we live in a culture that doesn't really honor that. We are all about the blossoming and the blooming and the flowers and all the things that happen above ground that we deem as beautiful and lovely. But maybe we haven't really come to understand the power, the beauty, the very presence of the soil beneath our feet. I remember being very discombobulated when we were in the beginning of the pandemic, and I had an acupuncturist who recommended, her prescription for me, if you will, was to take off my shoes and stand on the earth. To take off my shoes and to feel the ground beneath me and to connect to something. And that's what we're talking about this morning. We're talking about the groundedness of spirit. And many of the zeitgeist and the popular trends and the culture and the things that we talk about, when we talk about spirit, we think of airy things, right? We think of, and if you come from a traditional background, you might be thinking of God above, right? But what we know is God is below as well. God is in the very earth we stand on. I was at a retreat up in Canada over the summer, and there was one guy who never had shoes on. The entire conference, everywhere I saw him, in restaurants, downtown, in the conference, the guy was barefoot constantly. And I remember looking over at him and thinking that it was strange, but at the same time, I got it. You know, he didn't want to feel disconnected from life. And so he was barefoot everywhere he went while he was with us. And I wondered if that's how he went through the airport to go home. You know, Ernest Holmes reminds us that life is all there is. And because both in nature and in spirit, nothing is ever wasted. Nothing is wasted. Spirit uses everything, all of life. It uses the things that the decompose, that go into the soil. It uses the life beneath us. It uses those creepy crawly things, the earthworms, I remember back east when I would be doing some gardening and I'd be tilling the soil and I'd see all these, I'd reach some sort of patch of dirt and there'd be a ton of potato bugs. Anybody know what potato bugs are? Now, I was not moved to sit down among them. But I knew they were doing the work of tilling the soil, of aerating the soil, of making sure that that oxygen and nutrients could move through the soil so that it could support life. And a lot of times we don't realize that even the decay that we might be experiencing, and maybe that decay shows up as a lost job. Maybe that decay shows up in your life as a lost friendship, or moving to a new place and leaving behind your friends and family. Maybe that decay shows up as losing a loved one. And oftentimes when we have those experiences of loss, we don't see them as the rich, fertile ground of spirit tilling the soil of our soul, getting us ready for something new. One of my beloved teachers, Marcia Sutton, used to say, incomplete endings inhibit new beginnings. And I think in our culture we have lots of incomplete endings. There's places where we aren't comfortable with loss. We're only comfortable with the new shiny bauble of whatever it is we're looking for. And yet there is richness in our losses as well as in our successes. And so that's where we can get grounded, when we can remember the power and the presence of God in everything, and that everything is always in transition, transforming, shifting. Energy can never be destroyed. It only changes shape or form. It moves from one form to another. And as I was putting together my remarks for this morning and I was thinking about this topic, I was reminded of my father. My father retired at the ripe age of 42 and left his first career as a salesman and moved to the Ozarks with his second wife when I was a young adult and became an organic farmer. Now, I don't know if you can imagine this, but, he was for most of my growing up, he was that guy with the short haircut and the suit and the tie and the collar buttoned all the way up to his neck and clean shaven. And this guy decided in his second career to be an organic farmer in the Ozarks. And I have this beautiful picture of him in work boots and jeans and a white t-shirt and a beard down to the middle of his chest. But he still had the salesman haircut. Yeah, he really reinvented himself. And one of the things that he taught me when he moved out, and I did not go with him to the Midwest, but when he moved out to the Ozarks and became an organic farmer, he was in the Ozarks. And if you know anything about the geography of the Ozarks, then there is lead hills. They are lead-lined hills, and the dirt is like clay. And he wanted to be a farmer, and so the only way that he could become an organic farmer in those lead-lined hills was to make his own dirt. So he made an acre of raised beds, and he fed those raised beds with chicken manure and kitchen scraps. He would go out there, was a guy who grew mushrooms, and he would go out there and get all his used logs, and he tilled all of that, and it took him a couple of years, but he had like the richest soil around, and he grew tomatoes and herbs, and the businessman in him never quite left, and he ended up starting a business before it was popular. All those little herbs that you buy in packages in the grocery store? Well, he was doing it on his own in the Midwest until the the big companies started doing that. But my point in sharing that with you is that he understood and he taught me the importance of tilling and feeding the soil. And it's a great metaphor for our spiritual journey. It's a great metaphor for the soul of us that needs to continue to be cultivated, that we continue to need to nourish it. And sometimes it gets nourished with some icky stuff. I can tell you from personal experience that some of the hardest things that I've had to move through have become some of the biggest strengths that I have. And what I've learned in this philosophy and in teachings like this is that when we can begin to understand and respect that the grief and the sorrow has as much to do with the care and feeding of our soul as the happiness and the joy and the successes, when we begin to understand that and move into that consciously, well, the harvest is amazing. Wouldn't you agree, those of you who have done that, who have moved through your hard times and done it consciously and integrated whatever it was that experience came to tell you? So when we talk about this idea of the ground of our being, we're talking about loving it all. Loving the good times and loving the hard times, loving the sad times, knowing that it's all God moving through our life, like the earthworm that goes through the soil and it swallows dirt and then it evacuates dirt. Life is like that, and the sooner we can embrace that, the more we are going to experience a greater depth within ourselves. There's a fun story that a fellow by the name of John Rodell was writing about, where he said he had a wild and crazy lawn and garden, and one day his neighbor came up to him and gave him some weed killer and said, "You got to take care of those weeds." And he looked at him and he said, "Well, they're flowering. I don't know that I need to kill them." And he went on to draw out this metaphor that oftentimes when we find things that annoy us, when we find things that we don't find lovely, we throw poison at them. We throw poison at them through our dislike and our judgment, and through avoiding them or attacking them in one form or another, when this is life too. This is life too. What I have found in my own, there's a great practice in farming called biodynamic farming, and it's Rudolf Steiner made it popular back in the day, and the idea was that you would let a piece of ground just go wild. And that piece of ground, the weeds and the crazy stuff and the stuff that you didn't know was there would come up and it would grow, but the same thing would happen underneath the soil. It would help to uncompact the soil and loosen it up, and then you would till it all back into the soil from which it came. Now you may feel like I'm beating this metaphor of gardening up quite a bit. You can tell I miss gardening. But my point is that, we don't have to kill it. Whatever it is, we don't have to make it go away. We don't have to eradicate those things that are uncomfortable, those things that we're not sure of, those things that make our skin crawl. There's something of God in it for you as well. There's something in the groundedness of your being that it's there to help open you up about, help so that you can see that the bliss and the joy and the beauty of life is in the weeds as it is in the roses. That life has nothing but blessings to offer you, no matter how it shows up. And so I thought, as we talked about this topic of grounding, I'd offer this practice to you, that just a couple of steps that when you're feeling kind of like I was in the pandemic, where I was feeling very like sinning about how I was going to stay grounded and how I was going to continue to build community when everybody had to social distance and or shelter in place. The thing that I found to ground me was leaning into it, to being still and listening, to following my acupuncturist advice and taking my shoes off and feeling the ground beneath my feet, of simply positioning myself exactly where I am, to pause, to see what this experience had to teach me, to let Spirit speak to me through silence, and to settle in. And quite simply, that first step is to be still and listen. The second step when you're trying to ground yourself is to honor what's beneath, to gently till the soil of your soul and be aware of what's buried there, that wants oxygen, that wants to be cultivated, that wants to come forward. The third step is to release consciously, to bless whatever comes up for how it has served you, and to allow it to return back to that creative process, to allow it to move through you, not to avoid it or push it away or bury it deeper, but to allow it to come up, to be released, whatever it is that's providing you with turmoil or discord. And then fourth step is to trust renewal, because beneath every ending, life is still moving. Life is still transiting itself through us. It is still making our roots reach deeper. It is the soil in our soul that is alive in and of itself. And so the thing to do when we are finding ourselves dealing with loss or discord or challenging things isn't to run, it isn't to fight, it is to be still, to go deeper, to let go, and to trust that something new is coming forward. I have a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. He wrote a beautiful essay on nature. And he wrote, "In the woods, I return to reason and faith. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part or particle of God." It's a beautiful essay that talks about the livingness of all nature. It talks about the movement of nature through its paces. And we can always take a page from nature when we are moving through our own paces, to remember that when the tree lets go of its leaves, it doesn't die. It's nourishing itself. As the leaves decompose around its roots and the nutrients that are still in those leaves fall deep into the soil, it doesn't cry, it's over. It doesn't lament, "Where are my leaves?" It just lets go. And that's what we need to do. We need to just let go and trust the process of life as it moves through us. We don't have to cling to the old, and we can release with love. And I'll end with this quote, also from Ralph Emerson, Waldo Emerson. "The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part or particle of God." Thank you very much. So let's pray, shall we? Do our spiritual mind treatment, that affirmative prayer. And so knowing that anything that is happening in your life right now is happening to serve you. And so I speak this word on behalf of myself and anyone within the sound of my voice, knowing that the power and the presence of the one life, visible and invisible, is moving through all life. It is blessing all life. It is the divine influx of the creative process, the givingness of spirit to life itself. And so as we accept that idea that life is giving itself to us, I know for each one that we are served by life. We are served by the blossoms, and we are served by the dying back of those blossoms. We're served by all the seasons of our life. And so I trust for each one that we bring ourselves consciously through all transitions that we may be experiencing. I trust that this transition of life that is forever happening, whether we want it to or not, is a blessing of the creative process, the renewal of life by means of each one. So we just breathe that in and know that even in a moment of loss, we can experience renewal. We can experience the breath of God, inhaling and exhaling by means of our body temple, by means of our career, by means of our financial situation, by means of our very life. For this is the way of nature. This is the way of the universe, forever breathing through us to experience life. So I give great thanks of gratitude for all the blessings, for everything, knowing that it's the possibility and the potentiality of the divine moving through each one and honoring that space of creation, the liminal space between the ending and the beginning, and the ending again in the beginning. Spirit is ever in motion, so I give great thanks for this. I surrender my word, and together we say, and so it is.